I stood in a ballroom wearing a $200 dress while surrounded by women in couture gowns, pretending to be a paralegal instead of a partner at one of the city's top law firms, and watched my future mother-in-law hand me a $20 bill with a pitying smile. "For cab fare home, dear," she said. "I know things must be tight on your salary." My fiancé, Michael, squeezed my hand in what I thought was support, but I'd later realize was a warning to keep playing along. That was the moment I understood I'd made a terrible mistake, not just in lying about who I was, but in agreeing to marry a man who'd asked me to. To understand how I ended up pretending to be poor at my future in-law's party, you need to know about the journey that made me who I am, and why I was foolish enough to hide it. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. My father worked at an auto parts factory for 30 years. My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in the suburbs. We weren't poor, but we were always aware of money, always calculating, always careful. I wore hand-me-downs from my older cousin Jennifer. We clipped coupons and shopped sales and considered eating out at a chain restaurant a special occasion. But my parents had dreams for me, big dreams. They both came from families where nobody had finished high school, let alone college. They were determined that I would have opportunities they'd never had, so they sacrificed. They worked overtime and saved every penny they could. They encouraged my education obsessively. "School is your ticket out, Sophia," Dad would tell me while helping with my homework at the kitchen table. "You're smart, you work hard, you can be anything you want to be." I believed him. I studied relentlessly, got straight A's, participated in every extracurricular activity that might look good on college applications. I was on the debate team, served as student council treasurer, volunteered at the library. I had no social life because I had no time for one. While other kids were at parties or the mall, I was studying or working my part-time job at a grocery store, saving money for college. It paid off. I got a full academic scholarship to Ohio State University. My parents cried at my high school graduation. Mom kept saying, "We did it. We actually did it." As if my achievement was theirs too, and in a way it was. College was the first time I was surrounded by people from different economic backgrounds. My roommate freshman year, Amanda, came from a wealthy suburb of Columbus. Her parents were both doctors. She had a car on campus, went shopping without checking price tags, talked casually about summer trips to Europe. Meanwhile, I was working 20 hours a week in the campus bookstore and eating ramen in my dorm room to save money. But I was determined not to feel inferior. I studied harder than anyone I knew. I got better grades. I learned to navigate this world of privilege I'd entered, to speak the language, to present myself as someone who belonged. I discovered I was good at it, at adapting, at assimilating, at making people forget I came from a different world than they did. I graduated summa cum laude and went straight to law school at Case Western Reserve. I took out student loans that terrified me, but I knew it was an investment in my future. Law school was brutal, the competition, the workload, the constant pressure, but I thrived on it. I'd spent my whole life proving I belonged, and law school was just another arena to do that in. I graduated in the top 10% of my class and was recruited by a prestigious corporate law firm in Chicago. At 25 years old, I moved to a city where I knew no one, started a job that paid more money than my parents had ever made combined, and began building the life I'd always dreamed of. The work was grueling. 100-hour weeks were normal. I lived in a studio apartment and slept 4 hours a night and survived on coffee and takeout. But I was building something, a career, a reputation, security my parents had never known. By the time I was 30, I'd made junior partner. By 34, I was a full partner with my name on the door. Sophia Bennett, partner, corporate law. I'd earned it through sheer determination and countless sacrifices. I'd given up weekends and holidays and the possibility of work-life balance. I'd delayed dating, marriage, children, all the things I'd assumed would happen eventually, because my career demanded everything from me. But I'd also bought a beautiful condo in downtown Chicago. I could afford designer clothes and nice restaurants and the occasional vacation. I'd paid off my student loans. I'd bought my parents a new car and helped them with their mortgage. I'd done what they dreamed I would do. I'd made it out. The irony was that success had made me lonelier than I'd ever been in my struggling days. I had colleagues but few real friends. I dated occasionally, but nothing stuck. Men were either intimidated by my career or resentful of it. They'd make jokes about me being the breadwinner or comments about me wearing the pants. They'd feel emasculated when I picked up the check or when I had to cancel dates for work emergencies. By 35, I'd almost resigned myself to being alone. I told myself I'd made my choice, career over relationship, and I was fine with it. I had a good life. I didn't need a partner to complete me. And then I met Michael. I met Michael Richardson at a corporate event when I was 35 years old. It was one of those networking mixers I normally avoided, but my firm was hosting it, so attendance wasn't optional. I was standing by the bar, checking my phone and counting down the minutes until I could politely leave, when someone said, "You look about as thrilled to be here as I am." I looked up to see a man about my age, tall with dark hair and an easy smile, holding 2 glasses of wine. "That obvious?" I asked. "Only to someone else who'd rather be anywhere else." He handed me one of the wine glasses. "Michael Richardson, and before you ask, yes, I'm supposed to be networking. No, I'm not enjoying it." I laughed. Sophia Bennett, and I feel exactly the same way. We ended up talking for 2 hours, tucked away in a corner away from the networking chaos. Michael was a financial consultant who worked with nonprofits, helping them manage their endowments and investments. He was intelligent and funny and genuinely seemed interested in what I had to say. When I mentioned I was a corporate attorney, he didn't make any jokes about sharks or billable hours. He asked thoughtful questions about my work and listened to my answers. "I'm impressed," he said when I described a recent case I'd worked on. "That must have been incredibly complex." "It was," I admitted, "but that's what I love about my work, the challenge of it." "Do you ever get tired of the hours?" "Sometimes, but I've worked too hard to get where I am to coast now." He nodded like he understood. I respect that. Ambition in a woman is attractive. It was such a simple statement, but it meant everything to me. After years of men being threatened by my success, here was someone who found it appealing. We started dating, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I'd found someone who actually got it. Michael understood demanding careers because he had one too. He didn't resent when I had to work late or cancel plans for emergencies. He was supportive and encouraging and proud of my accomplishments. "You're amazing, you know that," he'd say after I'd tell him about winning a case or closing a deal. "I don't know how you do what you do." 6 months into our relationship, I met his sister Caroline at a coffee shop. She was lovely, warm, and welcoming, but there was a moment that should have been a warning sign. When she asked what I did for work, and I told her I was a partner at a law firm, her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, how impressive, you must work all the time." "I do work a lot," I admitted, "but I love what I do." "Of course." She sipped her coffee. "Michael mentioned you have quite a demanding career. Our family is pretty traditional. We believe in strong family values, time together, that sort of thing. But I'm sure you two will figure out how to balance everything." It was said pleasantly enough, but I caught the subtext. Your career might be a problem. When I mentioned it to Michael later, he waved it off. "Caroline's just old-fashioned. Don't worry about it. My family will love you." But he said it in a way that made me wonder if he was trying to convince himself as much as me. Michael proposed when we'd been together for 8 months. It was romantic and thoughtful. He took me to the restaurant where we'd had our first real date and proposed with a beautiful vintage ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes without hesitation. I was 36 years old, in love with a man who seemed to respect and support me, ready to finally build the personal life I'd been putting off for years. The wedding planning began immediately, and that's when I started to realize Michael's family situation was more complicated than he'd let on. His parents, Thomas and Patricia Richardson, came from old money. Not just wealthy, but generational wealth, the kind where you have a family estate and a legacy and expectations about how things are done. Michael had been relatively open about his background, but he downplayed it. "My parents are comfortable," he'd said. Comfortable turned out to mean a mansion in Lake Forest, a a summer home in Michigan, and enough old money that they'd never needed to work. Why didn't you tell me your family was this wealthy? I asked after seeing photos of the Lake Forest estate. He shrugged uncomfortably. I don't like to make a big deal about it. I've always been more interested in what I do than what I come from. It was an admirable sentiment, but it also meant I was going into his family situation blind, and that blindness would cost me. The first real conversation about meeting his parents happened about a month before their annual charity gala, where Michael wanted to introduce me formally. We were having dinner at my condo when he brought it up. So about the gala, he began, setting down his fork. I want to prep you a bit about my parents. Okay, I said slowly. What do I need to know? They're traditional, old school. They have certain expectations about how things should be. What kind of expectations? He hesitated. They believe in traditional gender roles. My mother never worked. She focused on raising us and supporting my father and charity work. That's the model they know. Michael, I'm not going to quit my job if that's what you're worried about. We've talked about this. No, of course not. I'd never ask you to do that. I'm just saying they might not understand your career at first. They might need time to adjust. Adjust to what? The fact that I work. To how demanding your work is, to how successful you are. He reached across the table for my hand. Sophia, you're a partner at a major law firm. You're incredibly accomplished. You're amazing. But my parents, they come from a different era. My mother might feel threatened by that. My father might see it as competition with me. Competition with you? I pulled my hand back. Michael, I'm not competing with you. We're partners. I know that, but they might not see it that way initially. I just want to make this introduction go smoothly. What exactly are you suggesting? He looked uncomfortable. Maybe don't lead with the partner thing. Maybe just say you're an attorney. You don't have to lie, just don't emphasize how successful you are right away. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You want me to downplay my career to make your parents comfortable? Just at first. Just until they get to know you. Once they see how wonderful you are, the career thing won't matter. The career thing is who I am, Michael. It's not separate from me. I know, and I love that about you, but can't you just ease them into it, for me? And there it was. The request to make myself smaller, to hide parts of myself, to accommodate his family's discomfort with who I was. Every instinct I had screamed at me to say no, to tell him if his parents couldn't accept me as I was, then they didn't deserve to know me. But I was in love with him. I wanted to marry him. And I told myself it was just one night, just an introduction, that I could play along temporarily and show my real self later once I'd won them over. I told myself it was strategic, not self-betraying. So I said yes. The night of the charity gala, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes trying to decide what to wear. I'd originally planned to wear a designer gown I'd bought for these occasions. Sophisticated, expensive, clearly indicating I belonged in these circles. But now, after my conversation with Michael, I wasn't sure. I called my best friend Rachel, who'd known me since law school and was one of the few people I trusted completely. Should I wear the Valentino or something more understated? I asked her. Why would you wear something understated to a gala? She asked, confused. I explained the situation. Michael's request that I downplay my success, my agreement to do so, my current wardrobe crisis. Rachel was silent for a long moment. Then, Sophia, are you seriously going to pretend to be less than you are to impress his parents? I'm not pretending to be less. I'm just not advertising how much I make. That's literally pretending to be less. You're a partner at a prestigious firm. You've earned the right to wear whatever the hell you want and own your success. I know, but Michael said. Michael asked you to hide who you are. Do you realize how problematic that is? It's one night, Rachel. One introduction, then I can be myself. If you have to hide yourself to be accepted, that's not acceptance. That's tolerance of a false version of you. I knew she was right, but I didn't want to hear it. I have to go. I'll call you tomorrow. I wore a simple black dress I'd bought on sale years ago. Not designer, not expensive looking, just plain. I did my makeup subtly. I wore minimal jewelry. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. I looked like a dulled-down version of myself, a shadow. Michael picked me up and immediately smiled. "You look beautiful, perfect." Perfect for what? I wanted to ask. Perfect for pretending to be someone I'm not. The gala was held at his parents' estate in Lake Forest. As we drove through the gates and up the long driveway, I felt increasingly out of place. The house, mansion, really, was enormous. Valets were parking cars. People in formal wear were streaming in through the front entrance. This was a world I'd entered professionally many times but never personally. "Nervous?" Michael asked, squeezing my hand. "A little," I admitted. "Don't be, just be yourself." He paused. "Well, you know what I mean." I knew exactly what he meant. Be yourself, but not too much yourself. Be charming, but not threatening. Be intelligent, but not more successful than he was. Be enough to be acceptable, but not so much that you made anyone uncomfortable. We entered the house and were immediately immersed in a sea of wealth. The women wore designer gowns and jewels that probably cost more than cars. The men wore custom tuxedos and discussed golf games and stock portfolios. Staff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played classical music in the corner. I'd been to plenty of events like this for work, but always as a professional, as an equal. Tonight, in my sale-rack dress and my diminished identity, I felt like an imposter. Michael's mother, Patricia Richardson, found us within 10 minutes. She was exactly what I'd expected, impeccably dressed, perfectly coiffed, with the kind of polished appearance that comes from a lifetime of being wealthy. She was in her mid-60s but looked younger, probably thanks to excellent skincare and possibly excellent plastic surgery. "Michael, darling," she kissed his cheek, then turned to assess me. Her gaze traveled from my hair to my dress to my shoes, and I saw the exact moment she categorized me. Not their class, not their world, not good enough for her son. "Mother, this is Sophia Bennett, my fiancé." I extended my hand. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. Richardson." She took my hand limply, barely making contact. "Yes, Michael has mentioned you. You work with him, is that right?" "I'm an attorney," I said carefully, following Michael's script. "I work in corporate law." "Oh, a lawyer." She said it the way someone might say a tax collector or a telemarketer. "How industrious, and you're still practicing, even engaged to Michael." The implication was clear. Why would I need to work when I was marrying her son? "I enjoy my work," I said, keeping my voice pleasant. "How nice." She smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Michael, your father wants to introduce Sophia to the Hendersons. They're major donors." She steered us toward an older couple, introducing me as Michael's friend Sophia, not Michael's fiancée Sophia. I noticed the distinction. So did Michael. He didn't correct her. The evening continued in this vein. Patricia introduced me to various people, each time with subtle digs wrapped in false pleasantness. "This is Sophia. She works in law. How ambitious." "Sophia has a career. Isn't that modern?" "She's very independent. Quite different from the girls Michael usually dates." Each introduction felt like a small humiliation. But the worst part wasn't Patricia's barely concealed disdain. It was Michael's silence. He stood beside me, smiling blandly, saying nothing to defend me or correct his mother's implications. About an hour into the event, Patricia pulled me aside while Michael was talking to his father across the room. "Sophia, dear, I wanted to have a little chat. Mother to future daughter-in-law." I braced myself. "Of course. I want you to know that I think it's wonderful that you have a career. Very empowering, as they say these days. But I hope you understand that being part of our family comes with certain expectations." "What kind of expectations?" "Well, for one, family comes first. Always. Michael's father built his business on the understanding that I would handle the home front completely. That's how successful marriages work in our family. The man focuses on his career, and the woman focuses on supporting him and raising the children. Mrs. Richardson, with all respect, that's not how Michael and I plan to structure our marriage. We both have careers. We'll figure out balance together." Her smile tightened. Of course, dear, I'm sure you'll figure it out, although I do wonder. She paused, as if considering her words carefully. What kind of salary does a law firm paralegal make these days? I felt my stomach drop. I'm sorry, what? You said you work in corporate law. As a paralegal, correct? I was just curious about the salary. It must be modest, I imagine. She'd misunderstood, or Michael had deliberately misrepresented, my position. She thought I was a paralegal, not a partner. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could correct her, reveal the truth, and violate the agreement I'd made with Michael to downplay my success. Or I could play along with this misunderstanding, let her think I made a fraction of what I actually made, and preserve the peace Michael had asked me to preserve. I made the wrong choice. It's enough, I said vaguely. Her expression shifted from polite condescension to outright pity. Oh, you poor dear. Well, that will certainly change once you're married to Michael. You won't have to worry about money anymore. You can even quit if you want. Focus on other things. I don't want to quit my job, Mrs. Richardson. Of course not, dear. Not yet anyway. But once children come, you'll see. Career ambitions fade when you have little ones to care for. I felt rage building but swallowed it down. This was Michael's mother, my future mother-in-law. I needed to keep the peace, just get through tonight. She patted my hand patronizingly. I know this world must be overwhelming for you, all this wealth, all these successful people. But don't worry, we'll help you adjust. The Richardson family takes care of its own, even when they marry someone from a different background. Someone from a different background, someone poor, someone beneath them. The evening got worse. Michael's father, Thomas, engaged me in conversation that was clearly an assessment disguised as small talk. So, Sophia, Michael tells me you're from Ohio originally. Yes, Cleveland. And your father, what does he do? He worked at an auto parts factory for 30 years. He's retired now. I saw his eyebrows raise slightly. Blue collar, not their class, another check in the not suitable column. And your mother? She cleaned houses. I said it with as much dignity as I could muster, proud of my mother's hard work even as I saw Thomas process this information as further evidence of my unsuitability. How hardworking? So you're the first in your family to attend university? Yes, I am. Well, that's quite an accomplishment. Michael does like a project. A project? As if I was something broken he was fixing. As if my entire life's work, my education, my success, my achievements meant nothing because I came from the wrong zip code. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone. I locked myself in a stall and took deep breaths, trying to calm the fury and humiliation coursing through me. Rachel's words echoed in my head. If you have to hide yourself to be accepted, that's not acceptance. When I emerged, Patricia was waiting by the sinks, touching up her lipstick. There you are, dear. I was hopping to catch you alone. She reached into her small designer purse and pulled out cash. $20. She held it out to me. For cab fare home, I know things must be tight on your salary. Please take it. I stared at the $20 bill, understanding clicking into place. She pitied me. She thought I was poor, struggling, barely scraping by on a paralegal's salary. And she was offering me money like I was a charity case. The rage I'd been suppressing all night erupted. But before I could respond, Michael appeared in the doorway. There you two are. Mother, Dad wants you. Something about the auction. Patricia tucked the 20 back in her purse. Of course. We'll talk more later, Sophia. She swept out, leaving Michael and me alone. I need to leave, I said, my voice shaking. Right now. What? Why? The night's barely started. Your mother just tried to give me cab fare because she thinks I'm too poor to afford my own ride home, Michael. That's why. He had the grace to look embarrassed. She was just trying to be nice. Nice? She's been patronizing me all night. Your whole family has. And you've just stood there letting it happen. Sophia, please, can we just get through tonight? We can talk about this later. No, we're talking about it now. Michael pulled me into a study away from the party, closing the door behind us. The room was all dark wood and leather furniture. the kind of masculine study that screamed old money. "Okay, let's talk," he said, his tone placating. "I'm sorry my mother was insensitive. She doesn't know you yet. Once she gets to know you." "She thinks I'm a paralegal, Michael." He looked confused. "What?" "Your mother thinks I'm a paralegal. Not an attorney, not a partner, a paralegal. How did she get that impression?" His face colored slightly. "I might have mentioned you worked in law without being specific about your title." "You lied to her." "I didn't lie, I just didn't elaborate. There's a difference." "No, there really isn't. You deliberately misrepresented my career to your parents because you were afraid of how they'd react to the truth. I was trying to make this easier for everyone." "Easier for who, Michael? Certainly not for me. I've spent the entire night being condescended to, pitied, and treated like I'm beneath your family. And you've stood there silent, letting it happen. What did you want me to do? Cause a scene?" "I wanted you to defend me. I wanted you to correct your mother when she introduced me as your friend instead of your fiancé. I wanted you to stop your father when he called me a project. I wanted you to stand up for the woman you claim to love instead of worrying more about keeping your parents comfortable." "You're being unfair," he said, his own anger rising now. "I asked you for one favor, one night of not making everything about your career, and you agreed. You can't be mad at me now for something you chose to do." "I chose to do it because you asked me to. Because you said your parents needed time to adjust, that we'd reveal the truth gradually. But now I see what's really happening. You're ashamed of me." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You deliberately downplayed my career. You let your family believe I'm less successful than I am. You stood by while they treated me like a gold digger or a charity case. If you were proud of me, if you respected me, you wouldn't have asked me to hide who I am." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "It's not about shame, Sophia. It's about strategy. My family holds very traditional views. If I'd told them you make more money than I do, if I'd told them you're a partner while I'm still building my consulting business, they'd have seen it as a threat to natural order. They'd have fought our engagement. So you lied to manipulate their perception, and you asked me to participate in that lie. I was protecting our relationship." "No, Michael, you were protecting yourself from your parents' disappointment, from their judgment, from having to stand up to them and defend your choices. You don't understand what it's like growing up in a family like mine," he said, his voice rising. "Everything is about image, about tradition, about maintaining the family name. I can't just rebel against that. I have responsibilities." "And what about your responsibility to me, your future wife? Doesn't that matter?" "Of course it matters, but I have to balance everything. Why can't you understand that?" "I understand perfectly, Michael. I understand that when it comes down to a choice between me and your family's approval, you'll choose their approval every time. And I'm supposed to just accept being diminished, being hidden, being treated as less than I am because it's more convenient for you." "You're being dramatic." That word, dramatic, was like a match to gasoline. "I'm being dramatic." My voice was quiet now, dangerously calm. "I'm a partner at a major law firm. I've worked my entire life to get where I am. I came from nothing and built something remarkable. And tonight, I stood in your parents' mansion wearing a cheap dress, pretending to make a fraction of my actual salary, being pitied and patronized by people who have never worked a day in their lives. And you think I'm being dramatic for being angry about it?" "Sophia, tell me something, Michael. When exactly were you planning to tell your parents the truth? After the wedding? After we had kids? Or were you just going to let me play the role of the poor girl who married up for the rest of my life?" He didn't answer, and his silence told me everything I needed to know. "You never planned to tell them," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You were going to let them think whatever they wanted to think, because it was easier than having a difficult conversation with them." "It's more complicated than that." "It's really not. Either you're proud of who I am and willing to defend me, or you're not. And tonight showed me which one it is." I pulled off my engagement ring, his grandmother's ring that I'd loved, and held it out to him. "What are you doing?" he asked, alarm in his voice now. "I can't marry someone who's ashamed of me. Someone who thinks I need to be hidden or diminished or packaged differently to be acceptable. I've spent my whole life fighting to be seen as equal, to be respected for what I've achieved. I'm not going to spend my marriage apologizing for my success or pretending to be less than I am. Sophia, don't do this. We can work it out. I'll talk to my parents. I'll tell them the truth. It's too late, Michael. Because even if you tell them now, I'll always know that you didn't want to. That you had to be forced into it. That left to your own devices, you'd have let me be diminished indefinitely rather than risk their disapproval. I love you, he said, and there were tears in his eyes now. I thought you did, but love doesn't ask someone to be smaller. Love doesn't hide its partner or allow them to be disrespected. Love stands up and says, this is my person and they're amazing and you will treat them with respect or we're done. You couldn't do that, so I'm doing it for both of us. I pressed the ring into his hand and walked out of the study. I could hear the party continuing in the ballroom, all those wealthy people completely unaware that my life was falling apart. I grabbed my coat from the coat check and walked out the front door. I didn't have a car, Michael had driven, so I called an Uber. While I waited at the end of that long driveway, standing in my cheap dress in the cold night air, I felt everything crash over me. The humiliation of the evening, the betrayal of Michael's silence, the grief of losing a relationship I'd thought was real. But underneath all of that was something else, relief. Relief that I'd found out now, before the wedding, before I'd legally tied myself to a man who would always choose his family's comfort over my dignity. Relief that I'd found the strength to walk away instead of making excuses and justifications and slowly eroding myself to fit into their world. My Uber arrived, driven by a woman named Sarah who took one look at my face and said, "Rough night." You have no idea. Want to talk about it? And I did. I told this complete stranger the whole story while she drove me back to my condo in the city. She listened without judgment, occasionally interjecting with "damn," or "he did not," or "good for you for walking away." "Can I give you some advice?" Sarah said as we pulled up to my building. "Please. Never make yourself smaller for a man. Never. The right person will want you to take up as much space as you need, will want you to shine as bright as you can. Anyone who asks you to dim your light isn't worth your time." I tipped her generously and went upstairs to my condo that I'd bought with my own money, that I'd earned through my own hard work. I changed out of that terrible dress and threw it in the trash. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch in my pajamas, processing everything that had happened. My phone started ringing. Michael, I didn't answer. He called again and again. I turned my phone off. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls and texts from Michael. They ranged from apologetic, "I'm so sorry, please let me explain," to angry, "You're overreacting," to desperate, "Please don't throw away what we have over one bad night." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called Rachel. "Tell me you didn't go through with it," she said as soon as she answered. "I went through with it, and it was exactly as bad as you predicted." I told her everything. The dress, the introductions, the paralegal misunderstanding, Patricia's cab fare, Michael's silence, our confrontation, the broken engagement. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," Rachel said when I finished. "But also, I'm proud of you. You stood up for yourself." Did I, or did I just blow up my relationship over pride? Sophia, this wasn't about pride. This was about respect. He asked you to pretend to be less than you are, and then he stood by while his family treated you like you were beneath them. That's not a relationship. That's a trap. I loved him, Rachel. I know. But did he love you? Really love you? Or did he love the version of you that fit conveniently into his family's expectations? It was a question I'd been avoiding asking myself. Because I knew the answer, and it hurt. Michael showed up at my office 2 days later. My assistant buzzed me. "There's a Michael Richardson here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." "I'm busy." Says he'll wait. He waited for 3 hours. Finally, I agreed to see him, more to get him to leave than because I wanted to talk. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled, like he hadn't slept. "Thank you for seeing me. You have 15 minutes. I have a meeting." He sat across from my desk, looking around at my office. The corner office with the view, the bookshelves full of legal texts, the framed diplomas and awards on the wall. All the evidence of my success that he'd asked me to hide. I told my parents the truth, he said. About your job, your position, everything. And my mother was shocked, angry that I'd misled her. My father was actually impressed. He said any woman who makes partner at a firm like this is someone to respect. How progressive of him. Sophia, I was wrong about all of it. I was a coward. I was so worried about my parents' reaction that I didn't stop to think about what I was asking you to do. I didn't defend you when I should have. I let my family disrespect you. And I'm sorry. I'm truly, deeply sorry. Okay, that all you have to say? Okay, what do you want me to say, Michael? That I forgive you? That we can try again? Yes, that's exactly what I want. I love you, Sophia. I don't want to lose you over a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidental. What you did was deliberate. You deliberately asked me to hide who I am. You deliberately stood silent while your family treated me like I was beneath them. That wasn't an error in judgment. That was a revelation of your values. People can change. I can change. Because the problem isn't just what you did. It's what it revealed. You care more about your family's approval than about standing up for your partner. That's not something you can just fix with an apology. So that's it. We're done. You're just going to throw away 9 months together because of one bad night. That one bad night showed me what our entire marriage would have been like. Every family gathering, every holiday, every interaction with your parents would have been me walking on eggshells, trying not to be too much, too successful, too myself. I can't live like that. I wouldn't ask you to. You already did ask me to. And when it mattered, when you had the chance to defend me, you chose them over me. I can't trust that you wouldn't do it again. He stood up, angry now. You know what your problem is, Sophia? You're so proud of your accomplishments that you can't see when they're getting in the way of your relationships. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe you are too ambitious to be a good partner. And there it was. The truth he'd been hiding beneath the apologies. He agreed with them. He thought I was too successful, too ambitious, too much. Get out of my office, Michael. Gladly. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sat at my desk, shaking with adrenaline and anger. My phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. How did it go? He showed his true colors. Again. Riddance, drinks tonight. Absolutely. The weeks following the breakup were difficult. Not because I missed Michael. The more distance I got from the relationship, the more I realized I'd been in love with the idea of him rather than the reality. But because I had to process what had happened and what it meant. In therapy, I'd started seeing Dr. Lisa Martinez to work through everything. I unpacked the pattern I'd fallen into. You spent your entire life proving you were good enough, Dr. Martinez said during one session. Good enough for college, for law school, for your firm. And then Michael came along and told you that to be good enough for his family, you needed to be less. And you agreed. Why do you think that is? I wanted the relationship to work. But at what cost? What were you willing to sacrifice to make it work? Apparently my dignity. I think it goes deeper than that. I think there's a part of you that still feels like that working-class girl from Cleveland who doesn't quite belong in the world of success you've created. And when Michael asked you to pretend to be less successful, some part of you almost believed you should be. She was right. I'd spent so many years fighting imposter syndrome, constantly proving myself, that when Michael suggested I dial it back, some buried part of me thought maybe I'd been too much all along. You're not too much, Dr. Martinez said. You're exactly enough, and anyone who can't handle your success isn't right for you. I threw myself into work, taking on bigger cases, building my reputation even further. If Michael and his family thought I was too ambitious, I'd show them what ambition really looked like. But I also started examining what I actually wanted from life. Did I want partnership and marriage and family? Or had I just thought I was supposed to want those things? For so long, I'd been focused on career success that I'd never stopped to ask myself what would actually make me happy. My parents came to visit a few months after the breakup. I told them about Michael, though I'd downplayed the reasons for the split. It just wasn't right, I'd said. They didn't need to know about the humiliation of that night. But my mother, who was more perceptive than she got credit for, saw through it. He wasn't good enough for you, was he? She asked while we were having coffee at my condo. What makes you say that? Because you wouldn't have ended it if he was. You fight for things you want, always have. So if you let him go, he must have done something that showed you he wasn't worth fighting for. I told her the whole story then. The request to downplay my success, the night at the gala, the broken engagement. When I finished, my mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Your father and I cleaned houses and worked factories so you could have opportunities we never had. We didn't do that so you could make yourself small for some rich boy and his snobbish parents. We did it so you could stand tall, so you could be proud of yourself. Don't ever let anyone make you shrink, Sophia. Not for love, not for family, not for anything." I cried then, not from sadness but from gratitude. For parents who'd sacrificed everything to give me chances. For the strength they'd instilled in me. For the reminder that my success wasn't something to apologize for, it was something to celebrate. 6 months after the breakup, I ran into Caroline, Michael's sister, at a charity event. I almost avoided her, but she caught my eye and came over. "Sophia, how are you?" "I'm well, you?" "Good. I heard about you and Michael. I'm sorry it didn't work out." "Are you?" She smiled ruefully. "Honestly, not really. You were too good for him, and definitely too good for our family." I was surprised by her candor. "I thought you believed in traditional values and family togetherness." "I do, but I also believe in respecting women who have accomplished things. My mother is from a different generation. She doesn't understand women who work because she never had to. But I do, and I thought what Michael asked you to do was cowardly." "Did you tell him that?" "I did. We had a huge fight about it. He thought he was being strategic. I told him he was being ashamed of someone he should have been proud of." "Thank you for that." She hesitated, then said, "For what it's worth, he regrets it, the whole thing. He knows he messed up." "Good, he should." We talked for a few more minutes before going our separate ways. I felt a small sense of validation, knowing that even his own sister thought he'd been wrong. It's been 2 years since that night at the Richardson estate. I'm 38 now, still partner at my firm, still successful, still single. But I'm different in ways that matter. I no longer see my success as something I need to manage or downplay or apologize for. I've worked too hard for it to treat it as anything other than an achievement I'm proud of. When I'm introduced at events now, I lead with my full title. Sophia Bennett, partner at Morrison and Associates. I wear expensive dresses because I can afford them and I've earned the right to wear them. I date occasionally, but I'm much more selective about who I spend time with. At the first sign that a man is intimidated by or resentful of my career, I end it. I've learned that it's better to be alone than to be with someone who makes me feel like I need to be less. Last month, I met someone promising. His name is David, he's a doctor, and when I told him what I do for a living, his first response was, "That's incredible. What's the most interesting case you've worked on?" He asks questions about my work with genuine interest. He doesn't make jokes about me being the breadwinner or try to compete with my achievements. He just seems proud to be with me. It's early, and I'm cautious, but I'm also hopeful in a way I haven't been since Michael. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd married Michael. If I'd played along with the pretense, let his family believe I was less than I was, slowly eroded myself to fit into their expectations. I'd probably be miserable, resentful, trapped in a role that had nothing to do with who I actually am. Instead, I'm free to be fully myself, free to own my success without apology, free to build a life that reflects my values rather than someone else's outdated expectations. The hardest lesson I learned from that experience is that love shouldn't require you to diminish yourself. Real love, the kind worth having, celebrates your achievements, defends you when you're disrespected, and stands up for you even when it's uncomfortable. Anything less than that isn't love. It's convenience. I think about the woman I was that night, standing in that ballroom in a cheap dress, pretending to be someone she wasn't. I feel sad for her, but I'm also grateful to her, because she found the strength to walk away, to choose dignity over comfort, to value herself enough to say no. That's what I want other women to understand. You never have to make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's life. The right person, the right family, the right situation will embrace all of you, your ambition, your success, your strength. And if they can't, they don't deserve you. They say love means compromise, but there's a difference between compromise and self-erasure. Compromise is finding middle ground on where to live or how to spend holidays. Self-erasure is pretending to be less than you are so someone else can feel more comfortable. When Michael asked me to downplay my success at that gala, I told myself I was being accommodating, picking my battles, playing the long game. But what I was really doing was agreeing that my achievements were something to be ashamed of, that being successful made me less feminine or less lovable, that I needed to shrink myself to be acceptable. The night I spent pretending to be a struggling paralegal instead of a successful partner taught me more about myself and what I deserve than any amount of therapy could have. It taught me that respect isn't negotiable, that dignity matters more than keeping the peace, that I'd rather be alone and authentic than partnered and diminished. I don't regret ending my engagement. I regret that it took that night to show me who Michael really was and who I'd been willing to become for him. But I'm grateful I learned it before the wedding, before I'd legally and permanently tied myself to someone who would always choose his family's comfort over my dignity. If you're in a relationship where you're expected to downplay your achievements, hide your success, or make yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable, I want you to ask yourself this. Is this person celebrating you or tolerating you? Because tolerance isn't love. Love cheers for your wins. Love brags about your accomplishments. Love stands up and says, "This is my amazing partner," especially when, it's uncomfortable. You don't owe anyone your diminishment. Not your partner, not their family, not society's outdated expectations about how successful women should behave. You've worked hard for what you've achieved. Own it, celebrate it, and demand that the people in your life celebrate it with you. I'm Sophia. I'm 38 years old, a partner at a major law firm, and I make damn good money doing work I'm proud of. 2 years ago, I pretended to be poor to impress my fiancé's wealthy family, and the experience taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. I'm not too much. I'm exactly enough. And so are you. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have played along or walked out that night? Let me know in the comments.